On the morning of August 7, 1942, a young Marine pilot named Captain John L. Smith climbs into the cockpit of his stubby little Grumman F4F Wildcat on the deck of the USS Saratoga, and he knows exactly what the Japanese think of his airplane. They call it a joke. They laugh at its short wings, its slow speed, its weak guns. They've been carving up earlier Wildcats like Thanksgiving turkeys for months over China and the Dutch East Indies. Zero fighters dance circles around them, riddle them with cannon shells, and send American boys spiraling into the sea while the Japanese pilots wave as they fly away. But today, off a muddy jungle island most Americans have never heard of called Guadalcanal, everything is about to change, and the laughter is about to stop dead. 6 months earlier, in December 1941, the Empire of Japan slammed into Pearl Harbor and woke a sleeping giant. By the spring of 1942, their navy rules the Pacific. Their carriers roam wherever they want. Their Zero fighter is the king of the sky, fast, agile, long-ranged, armed with two 20mm cannons that tear wings off in a single burst. American pilots flying the older F4, F3 models get slaughtered. The scoreboards in Japanese ready rooms fill with kill after kill. They nickname the chubby Grumman the Flying Barrel and brag that any Zero pilot who can't shoot one down should turn in his wings. But back home in the United States, factories are roaring day and night. Grumman engineers work around the clock to fix the Wildcats' problems. They stuff a bigger engine into the nose, the Pratt & Whitney R1830-86 twin Wasp that pumps out 1,200 horsepower. They add armor plate behind the pilot's seat, something the Zero still doesn't have. They give the new F4F 6.50 caliber machine guns instead of 4, and they add folding wings so carriers can pack more of them below deck. It's still not as fast as a Zero, still can't turn with one, but now it can take a beating and hit back hard. And the men who fly them are changing too. These aren't the cautious pre-war Navy pilots anymore. These are kids from Texas ranches, Iowa farms, Brooklyn streets who learned to fly almost overnight and now burn to even the score. They study the combat reports from Wake Island and Coral Sea, and they figure something out. The Zero is a knife fighter, light and deadly up close, but if you refuse to dogfight, if you use teamwork, dive out of the sun, and never, ever turn with them, the Wildcat can bite. August 7th dawns hot and hazy. Marines storm ashore on Guadalcanal and seize a half-finished Japanese airfield they rename Henderson Field. By nightfall, the first Wildcats of Marine Fighting Squadron 223, the famous Cactus Air Force, land on that dusty strip with nothing but palm trees for cover. Captain Smith steps down from his plane, wipes the sweat from his eyes, and looks around at 19 other young men who know the Japanese will come for them tomorrow. Their average age is 24. Some still have high school class rings taped inside their cockpits for luck. The next morning the storm breaks. 27 Japanese bombers escorted by a swarm of Zeros scream in from Rabaul, 400 miles away. Smith and his boys scramble. Engines cough to life, propellers bite the humid air, and 12 Wildcats claw for altitude. The Japanese pilots see the short, squat Grummans and grin behind their goggles. Same old story, they think. Easy meat. But these aren't the same old Wildcats, and these definitely aren't the same old Americans. Smith's flight climbs hard into the sun, then rolls over and dives out of the blinding light straight at the enemy bombers. The Zeros are low, guarding the formation, caught flat-footed. Smith picks the lead bomber, holds his fire until he can see the rivets, then squeezes the trigger. 6.50 calibers roar. Tracers stitch across the Betty's belly and it explodes in an orange fireball before the Japanese even know they're under attack. In 30 seconds the Marines flame 4 more bombers and scatter the rest. The Zeros climb furiously to catch them, but the Wildcats are already streaking away, engines howling, using every ounce of that new horsepower. The Japanese pilots chase, and run straight into a second flight of Wildcats waiting higher up. It's called the Thach Weave, invented just months earlier by a quiet lieutenant commander named Jimmy Thach after he watched his squadron get torn apart. 2 Wildcats fly side by side. When a Zero latches onto one, they turn toward each other, crossing paths, forcing the Japanese pilot to pick one target, and the other Wildcat suddenly has a perfect deflection shot. Today it works like magic. Zeros twist and turn, but every time one gets on a Wildcat's tail, .50 caliber slugs rip into him from the side. 3 Zeros fall trailing smoke and the rest break off, stunned. When the smoke clears, the Japanese have lost 11 bombers and 3 fighters. The Marines have lost 2 Wildcats and 1 pilot. Captain Smith lands with 110 bullet holes in his airplane and a huge grin on his face. The laughter has stopped. Word races up the Japanese chain of command: the Americans on Guadalcanal are not running. Their little Grummans are fighting back, and fighting back hard. Tokyo orders the airfield retaken at all costs. What follows is 6 months of the most savage air combat the world has ever seen. Every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, the Japanese send everything they have. Bombers, fighters, even flying boats. The Cactus Air Force meets them with whatever can fly: Wildcats, then Army P-40s, later the first F4U Corsairs when they arrive. Pilots take off with patched-up airplanes held together by baling wire and prayer. They land, swallow a cup of wormy water and a spoonful of cold spam, then climb back in before the engines even cool. Marion Carl, a soft-spoken Oregon farm boy, shoots down 3 Zeros in one mission, then 4 Vals the next day. Joe Foss, a South Dakota kid who used to hunt pheasants with a .22, starts stacking kills so fast the Japanese put a bounty on his head. Joe writes home to his mom, "Don't worry, the Wildcat is a real honey now. She'll bring me back." He finishes the campaign with 26 victories, tying Eddie Rickenbacker's record from the First World War, and earns the Medal of Honor. But the cost is brutal. Every mission someone doesn't come back. Young men wave goodbye on the flight line, and an hour later their friends circle the burning wreck in the jungle, hoping against hope, then fly home missing another piece of their soul. Lieutenant Jack Conger writes to his wife in California, "If anything happens to me, just remember I love you more than anything in the world, and I'm proud to be doing this." 2 days later his Wildcat takes a 20mm shell through the cockpit over the slot, and he never pulls out of the dive. The Japanese throw their best pilots into the meat grinder, aces who owned the skies over Singapore and Java. Men like Hideyoshi Nishizawa, the Devil of Rabaul, credited with over 80 kills. But now they face Americans who refuse to play their game. Wildcat pilots learn to work in 4-plane divisions, never fight alone, always keep their speed up. They boom and zoom, hit and run, use the rugged Grumman like a flying tank. The armor plate saves life after life. The 6 guns chew Zeros to pieces when the Americans get their shot. By October the Japanese Navy steams south for a final showdown. They have to knock out Henderson Field or lose Guadalcanal forever. Night after night their battleships pound the airfield with 14-inch shells. Pilots sleep under their wings with helmets for pillows. Dawn reveals airplanes flipped over, shredded by shrapnel, yet mechanics work miracles with chewing gum and baling wire. Planes that should be scrap metal fly again. October 13th is the worst. Japanese cruisers shell the field for hours. Fuel dumps explode, tents burn, the runway looks like the surface of the moon. When the sun comes up only 6 Wildcats can fly. 40 Japanese bombers escorted by 30 Zeros roar in, certain this time the Americans are finished. 6 Wildcats scramble. 6 against 70. Captain Joe Foss leads them up. They climb into the sun, roll over, and dive. Foss latches onto a Zero, gives it a 3-second burst, and the Japanese fighter disintegrates. The other 5 Wildcats pair off, weaving, shooting, refusing to turn. Japanese formation discipline cracks. Bombers jettison their loads into the jungle and run for home. When it's over the scoreboard shows 16 Japanese planes down, 10 of them Zeros. Not one bomb hits Henderson Field. The 6 Wildcats land with fuel gauges on empty and ammunition racks bare, but every single pilot comes home. The Japanese admiral reads the after-action report and stares at the ocean for a long time. Something has changed in the Pacific. November brings the naval battle of Guadalcanal, 3 days of carnage at sea while the Cactus Air Force fights overhead. Wildcats strafe Japanese destroyers, escort Army B-17s, dual Zeros until the sky looks like the 4th of July. By the end, the Imperial Navy has lost 2 battleships, thousands of sailors, and any hope of reinforcing the island. Starving Japanese soldiers in the jungle hear the constant drone of American engines overhead and know the end is coming. On Christmas Day 1942, a skinny kid from Alabama named Jefferson DeBlanc takes off in his battered Wildcat to escort some Marine SBD dive bombers. The Japanese throw 40 Zeros at them. DeBlanc shoots down 2 Zeros, then 3 more Vals trying to bomb his dive bombers. His engine is hit, oil covers his windshield, flames lick back from the cowling, but he keeps fighting until every bomber is safe. Only then does he bail out over the water. Japanese fighters circle him in his raft, machine gunning the sea around him for sport. Coast watchers rescue him weeks later. He gets the Medal of Honor too. By February 1943, the Japanese quietly evacuate their last survivors from Guadalcanal. They leave behind 25,000 dead. The Cactus Air Force has lost 115 pilots, but they have shot down over 600 Japanese aircraft. The Wildcat, the little plane they laughed at, ends the campaign with a kill ratio better than 2-to-1 against the vaunted Zero. When the news hits the States, factory workers at Grumman cheer until they're hoarse. Newspapers run headlines screaming Guadalcanal our greatest victory. And in bars from San Diego to Boston, guys raise a glass to the kids who turned the tide with nothing but guts and a tough little airplane nobody believed in. Years later, John L. Smith, now a major with 20 victories, stands on the same Henderson Field, paved now, lined with Corsairs and Hellcats, and looks out at Iron Bottom Sound where so many ships and men rest. A young pilot asks him what it was like back then. Smith thinks for a minute, then says quietly, "We were scared every single day. But we were more scared of letting each other down than we were of dying. That's what made the difference." The Japanese never laugh at the Wildcat again. From Guadalcanal on, every time a Zero pilot sees those short, stubby wings and the big American star, he remembers the lesson those Marine boys taught over that muddy jungle strip: courage and teamwork can beat any wonder weapon in the world. And somewhere up there tonight, Joe Foss and Jack Conger and Jefferson DeBlanc and all the rest are still flying in tight formation, watching over the country they loved so much. They never asked for glory. They just wanted to come home. Most of them didn't. But because they stayed and fought with everything they had, the road to Tokyo opened wide, and the United States of America started the long, hard march that would end with victory in the greatest war the world has ever known. What would you have done if you were 22 years old, climbing into a shot-up Wildcat with 40 Zeros waiting upstairs and your best friend's empty cot back at the tent? Could you have pulled the canopy shut, firewalled the throttle, and roared off into that burning sky? Those boys did. Every single day. For 6 straight months. And because they did, everything changed. The laughter stopped at Guadalcanal. And freedom kept flying.